free.
Yeah, sure. Well, there are times when Matt and Bud, my roommate and her husband, get really, like, I'll say aggressive about something, and then one of us is on the other side, so we come in, and even if I don't have a strong opinion, I will support you just because they're ganging up on you.
Oh,
and
I do that all the time.
Yeah, so I will just be like, yeah, like, just to support you.
Bud does this thing, and I hate when men do this. I hate it, and he's so bad about it, is when I have an opinion about something where I don't quite understand, like, where something's happening. Okay, like, we watch professional wrestling a lot, and if I have an opinion about a storyline, and I say it, and I'm like, that's weird. I wish they didn't do it this way. I wish they did it this way because it makes more sense in terms of writing, blah, blah, blah. He, 100% of the time, will come back with a reason why it has to be that way. Mm-hmm. And it's never an actual reason.
Right, of course not.
It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's a fix for why it's shitty writing. Like, he's making an excuse.
He's being precious about it.
Yeah, he's being precious about it.
He doesn't want you to be critical of the things that he loves.
Yeah.
Which is, like, basically all we do.
Also something that I love, too.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy.
Yeah. No, that is a thing. I think that is a thing that more dudes do than women do.
Yeah.
I don't. But I mean, obviously.
The actually, ... actually.
Well, actually, what is that joke? It's like, where do men's rights activists get their water? From a well, actually.
Amazing. I love that.
I'm so bad at telling jokes, so it's not good.
But I liked that one.
Yeah, that's a good joke. I'm going to use that.
That's a good one.
Go
I'm going to text that to my mom later.
Mommy.
She's going to think it's really funny. I'll have to explain it to her, but she's going to think it's really funny once I do. She's going to be like, I don't get it. What?
Yeah.
What?
You're like, well, actually.
Well, actually, Mom, this is...
Well, actually.
And then she'll probably say something snarky like, oh, that's just like what you do.
Oh, Mommy.
But it's because I was that kid that was like, why?
Right.
Why? As a kid.
Yep.
So I get it. Sometimes she's right. Sometimes she's wrong.
That's the thing is, like, when you get a little older, you start to realize that your parents aren't right about everything. And you're like, whoa, my whole worldview is blown here.
I think I always knew that.
Did you really?
My parents are usually still right about stuff.
Right. But there are moments when my mom is wrong, though. Like, especially when it comes to, like, working in the industry, like, things like that. Like, she looks, or just work in general, like, work environment things. Like, she has, like, her worldview of how things are, and it hasn't changed. Like, and I don't know how long. Too. Like, these shoes, I was, like, shopping when I was home, and I was like, Mom, do you think I could wear these to work? And she was like, I don't think so. They're too casual for work. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, they're silver, and they don't have backs. I was like, work is not that formal.
Right.
I'm going to buy them anyway. And then I asked my boss, I wore them, and she's like, your shoes are so cute. And I was like, you think these are okay for work, right? And she was like, yeah, why would they not be? And I was like, my mom, because, you know, the thing is that sometimes even if you know they're wrong, you still, like, it kind of can bother you a little bit.
Still, you still internalize that, and you're like, well,
yeah.
But my mom said.
My
mom said that I shouldn't wear these silver shoes.
Because they're too casual for work.
My mom's critique is always, you need a necklace.
That's so funny.
So
you
helpful,
need a
Mom.
necklace. That's what she always says all the time. I hated wearing jewelry when I was younger.
Yeah.
I love it now, but I hated it when I was younger. And my mom's real fucking Chicana when it comes to jewelry. Like, she has a ring on every finger. I feel like when she sees other Hispanic women that have, like, as much jewelry on as she does, they, like, make eye contact and their souls meet a little bit. Like, because it's sweet, but it's also, like, a bit much where I'm like, Mom, do you really need to wear that much jewelry?
She does.
Which is fine. She loves jewelry. But her critique is always, you need a necklace. You need to wear a necklace.
So, Mommy.
And then I'm like, no, I don't. And I run out the door, and I'm like, maybe I did need a necklace to complete this outfit.
You know who loves jewelry?
Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton.
Yes.
Our Lord and Savior, Dolly Parton.
I don't know if you know, but we have this thing where we always have to mention Dolly.
Dolly Parton, yes.
It just happened by accident. But then we were like, well, we should probably keep doing that.
I read an article about her the other day.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
You
Is
know
she
what?
problematic?
No, she's not
Oh,
problematic.
good. Okay.
It was actually about her tattoos that she doesn't have, but people... Do you remember a few years ago when everyone started making up that rumor? Well, not making up, but they started talking about that rumor that her body is, like, covered in tattoos.
Oh, I remember that.
Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. It's so weird. I mean, she has a couple, but it was actually about that rumor and how silly it is. And
why does it matter?
And it was also about how she addressed it once. I think she addressed it on a late night show. She said, like, she was wearing a really low cut shirt, and the picture that they were using as, like, evidence that she has tattoos was cut the same way, and it had, like, a little dot or something. And she was like, look, you can't see anything. I don't have tattoos. But other than that, she hasn't really addressed it, which I kind of like, because also, why does it matter if she has a bunch of, she's covered in tattoos? And then there was this other there's a video that I watched on it where some guy was like, she totally has tattoos all over her body, you can tell, because she wears these gloves to perform that cover her hands and her arms. It looks like gloves that you wear when you have arthritis or carpal tunnel, and they're just nude, so of course she's going to be wearing those when she performs because she plays the guitar.
Right.
Like, I don't know why I was doing so much investigating into this, but the article was talking about how everyone was so angry that she didn't address it, and to me it's just like, it never mattered. And that's what the article was saying too, is that it doesn't matter. Why do we care? Yeah. She has a bunch of tattoos, and she has a bunch of tattoos.
Well, you can't win when you do address things like that. So that is the most powerful thing that you can do, is to just say, I'm not going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And she's so private about much of her life. Mm-hmm. Like, she has a really private marriage, and she's
been married forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like 50-something years,
That's
right?
Crazy.
Yeah. Wow. But she's an interesting person to talk about when you talk about femininity.
She is.
Too, because she's very open about how she presents herself, mm-hmm. and that she doesn't really care what people think about it. And I think that's really powerful. I think she's definitely a figure that some types of feminists, and I'm using that term loosely because I don't think you are really a feminist if you're critiquing women in that way. But she's a figure that some people want to comment on in that way, is like, you know, oh, well, you can't be a feminist if you look like that. But that's just as limiting as looking at anyone else and saying you have to look this way.
And it's also assuming that being a feminist means one thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where, I mean, there are some versions of feminism that are more helpful than others. I would argue, for example, that intersectional feminism is more valuable than corporate feminism, for instance. You know, but like the point is that there are different schools of thought about feminism. So to say that, you know, you have to look this way is one thing, but then to say, like, you are a feminist is another.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think she's kind of subversive in that way, because she's basically said, I'm going to do what I want, and I don't care what you say. I feel how I feel. I want to look how I want to look, and that's about me. It's not about you.
Yep.
And I think she's done a really good job of, even though the way that she looks we typically associate with a certain type of woman, I think she's done a very good job of not overly sexualizing herself. And especially when you look at interviews, she's quite serious, and she's so good at what she does. She's amazing, and she's really smart. And I was watching an interview with her, and I think it was Jay Leno, and he pulled her, she had on this like dress that had the shoulders cut out, which is like very in right now.
Oh,
this
yeah.
was 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And he pulled down one of the arms
Ew.
on the dress.
Ugh.
And she snapped at him, which was like very good for her. Yeah.
Right.
And she was like, don't pull on my dress. And he was so taken back by it. He was like, wait, what?
oh, I'm not allowed to just do whatever I want to your body?
Exactly. It was interesting.
What a novel idea.
Yep. But I think she does a really good job of that. Like, she wants to look a certain way, but she also wants to be treated for who she is.
Yeah.
And that's admirable.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I love her.
Love her.
Love her.
Love her.
Love Dolly. If you're listening.
Dolly, we love you.
What if she did?
Put it out in the universe.
Right? What if she was listening? What if this was the only podcast she listened to? And it was
she
because we talk about her all the
one
time.
of her like people to put it on her phone for her. She was like, "Can you download that for me?"
Yeah, or she was just like searching her name one day, and that like we came up because we mention her all the time.
I hope
she
so.
was like, "I'll give it a listen."
Yeah.
I'll give it a listen.
We can only hope.
Well, I think part of that whole kind of autonomy over your physical presentation and the way that you're perceived, I think that's part of the reason why Dolly Parton is such a gay icon. It's why a lot of queer people, and not just gay men, like the stereotype is that gay men love Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
I know all sorts of queer people who love Dolly Parton, you know, because she's sort of this take no shit woman, and she's been that way her whole life, you know, and that's something that can be learned from by anybody, you know. And I think a lot of queer people have to go through that phase of like not really giving a shit anymore, you know, to like get to the place where we want to be. So often people and perceptions and whatever like stand between you and that place, and she's a good role model for that. Like, I don't even really listen to country music, but I love her, you know, as like a pop culture figure. It's amazing. And like what she's done to empower herself and empower women and empower queer people, you know, and just sort of achieve that iconic status. And it's not just aesthetic, it's like an attitude thing. I really admire that. I think it's really great, especially in a genre that is so traditionally homophobic and straight.
Oh, yeah.
So like that's really great. I really admire that about her.
Yeah, and country music also is very much about perpetuating gender roles and like it's so much about tradition. And this is coming, I'm saying that as a person who does like country music, but I'm also very critical of it.
Oh, sure.
Like, I'm critical of everything I like, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't, I would either be asleep or I would just never watch or listen to anything at all. Yeah. Because there would be nothing left.
It's kind of exhausting.
It is.
Be like, oh, now I have to evaluate this. Like, I remember in college, in my first ever sociology class that I took, our final was to sociologically dissect The Lion King and talk about all the things that were racist and homophobic and sexist in it. And I was like, this is ruining my childhood, but like, I understand why I have to do it. Yeah. And now, you know, once you sort of hit that stage and you use that lens to look at things, you can't stop.
It's like you get feminist Lasik.
Yeah, right.
It's not just the lens anymore.
There
like you
go.
cannot reverse the process.
Yeah.
Once you hit a certain point, you can't go backwards. You like that?
That's very
you like
well
that
said.
analogy?
That's good.
I liked that.
We're so bad with these.
Really sloppy right
We're so professional.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell?
knocking over everything.
Well, did you want to talk about the different labels within?
If you want, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot to break down there.
I think like the one thing that I don't want to speak for other people, but the one thing that I could say about somebody who's decided very intentionally to present in a more masculine way within the queer female community, I had to make sure that the reasons that I was doing that weren't like quietly misogynistic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there is a certain like valorization of masculine presenting women in the queer community, right? Like that's how you're supposed to look if you're gay, and like that, you know, people can clock you, to borrow a phrase from trans folks, like people can clock you a lot more easily if you look a certain way, and like that's sort of like what gay hot is. You know what I mean? Like if you're like gay hot, you have this very specific look, and a lot of it is a lot of this stuff that like I have chosen. You know, like I have the undercut and you know all of this stuff. It's like, okay, well, yeah, but I did have to make sure that I was arriving at those things based on sort of what we were talking about before. if you're arriving at things that are in line with certain cultural expectations that you don't necessarily like the meaning behind, that you're arriving at them out of your own desire and not sort of some like compulsory feeling of like, well, if I want to be attractive, if I want to be seen as queer, if I want to be the right kind of queer, especially as like a thin white person, you know what I mean? Like, I'm disabled, but I'm still white. You know, like there's a lot of capital that comes from being like a white woman in queer world, right? It's like, you know, there's a ton of complicating factors that I have never had to contend with because nobody really, like, you know, I've never had to deal with racism from other queer people because I never will. You know, like white people don't experience systemic racism. That just doesn't happen. So like, you know, it's been interesting to sort of like arrive at this place and be like, okay, it's not because I think that being feminine makes you less queer. It's not because I think that that is unattractive. It's not because I'm fetishizing femme women. You know, it's not that I'm only trying to attract femme women and that I think that because I want to do that, that this is how I have to look. You know, it's like it has to be one from column A and one from column B for you to have a relationship. You know, like femme invisibility is such a huge issue, you know, along with bi invisibility and, you know, anything that doesn't conform to the idea of like, you know, a lesbian, capital L lesbian who looks a certain way. It can be very easy to feel like you don't belong. And so as somebody who arrived where I arrived, you know, I'm like constantly checking myself to be like, am I subconsciously thinking or doing something really shitty right now? And I just have no idea.
It's really interesting that, as you're saying, the queer community has created its own boxes when the community itself is like forged in not being part of the heteronormative culture.
Sure.
It's like, really?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I deal with that a lot. Like when I was dating, you know, I'm in a relationship now, but like when I was dating, I would deal with that with ableism a lot. Because you think that, oh, you know, everybody's a woman, so they're like more understanding, right? They're like gonna get it more than a guy would. And like, in some ways, I think that's true. I have a much easier time talking to other women about body image stuff than I ever would a man, you know? And so I'm like really glad for more reasons than I can name that I'm not trying to appeal to heterosexual cis dudes. That seems exhausting. And I apologize if that is, to anybody who that is your life, like I apologize that you were in that position because that seems impossible to me. You know? But I mean, people would say the same thing about me. You know, they'd look at my situation and they'd be like, why? You know? So I guess that's just how I know I'm gay. But anyway, like, you know, you assume that people are going to be more understanding because they've had experience being a societal outsider, right? And they have experience doing something that's against expectation. And I definitely took that with me into dating. I was like very afraid. I mean, disability is seen as like a huge liability in every situation, but probably most of all, maybe right after workplace politics comes dating. It's like this giant caveat that you feel like you have to apologize for, and you're like, but I have it under control, and let me explain to you all the reasons why this is not going to affect you. You know, I'm like trying to like minimize its place in your relationship or like your sexual viability or whatever. And so when I would bring that in, I'd be like, okay, well maybe they'll get it more than if it was like a straight dude, because then if it's a straight dude, it's like, do you feel like you need to take care of me? Is this some sort of weird hero complex bullshit that you have going on? You know, and like that definitely, I'm less afraid of that with women for sure. But just because somebody who's queer turns out doesn't mean that they can't be super ableist. You know, like it's the sort of thing where I would, you know, the minute I started talking about it, you could just see people like freak out. And, you know, they're trying really hard to like stay with you and not like reveal that they are like completely lost and completely terrified by you. But like, you know, it happened more than once that like everything's going fine until then, right? And then you bring it up and then it's like you're done, you know, and you're not going to get a call back from that person, and you know what I mean? Yeah. So like it's very interesting like how we've sort of replicated certain issues within our own boundaries. Like it's not, you know, and I mean, talk to any gay man about like the physical demands, you know, and the expectation there, right? Like it's, you know, they have their whole own thing going on. But like, you know, I never felt like I didn't belong in queer space, especially queer female space as a disabled person. But like dating was very hard, you know, because it was like the type of thing where you were almost too different for people. You know what I mean? They're like, well, I already came out and like already did that. And so like, I'm not going to bring a disabled girl home to my mom. You know what I mean? It's like too much for some people. And like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the person that I'm with now, I had been friends with for 2 years before. And so she like sees this as a very organic part of who I am, which is true. And it is also a thing that comes up all the time in our relationship, and not in a bad way, but it's just like, oh, this is like related, you know? And because we had that comfort with each other, it made it a lot easier. But when you're starting from zero and trying to get a stranger to like see you as a viable person that they want to like have another conversation with in their life, it can be very hard when you're dropping something on them that can feel like a giant reveal and feel like a lot of baggage, whereas what it actually is just like a part of your life.
I mean, as just a person dating, I run through so many scenarios in my head when I meet new people, but you have all these added layers that you have to run through too. It sounds a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I mean, you know, I think disabled people, wherever we are on the gender spectrum, like it can be a complicating factor. You know, like disabled men, it's like, you know, hegemonic masculinity doesn't really have room for disabled guys except for like Paralympians in wheelchairs. You know what I mean? And that's like somehow hot because it makes them more sensitive. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, that's not a thing. Like Oscar Pistorius killed somebody. You know what I mean? And everybody's like, oh, but it had to be an accident because he's a Paralympian and a hero. And it's like, he killed another person. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like, you get so invested in this idea of disability meaning certain things about people. So it's not just women, and you know, it applies to literally any person, like of any gender, because there aren't only two. We can all be held to those expectations. It just kind of gets magnified when you're also queer, or you're also a person of color, or you're also trans, or you're also of a particular social class, or you're also, you know, you add any number of things on top and it's like, oh, Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not like, I don't want to say like it shouldn't be a big deal, because like it is a big deal, you know what I mean? Like it's a part of your life, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, the solution is that we need to minimize its presence in your life, because that's erasure, that's not supportive.
But normalize, I think, maybe more, because I mean, how do you get people to stop having those reactions? It's if they know about it beforehand, right?
Right. And you know, I mean, I found that the best solution is just to like live my life. You know what I mean? Like I'm not ashamed and I'm not afraid to correct somebody when they say something like that. You know, like I used to be, like, especially if it's like somebody who, you know, has power over you in the workplace or something. Like I used to be very worried about like calling people out when they would say things to me that they thought were compassionate, but they're actually really ableist. Like I used to let it go, and now I'm like, actually, you know, and then I'll just say something the way that I really feel, you know, and then they're like, oh, okay, you know. Yeah. So
well, there's that moment of shame when someone calls you out on something, and it's hard to not to put it back on the person that made you feel that way.
Right.
That's something that I work really hard on. And if you're gonna be a feminist, if you're gonna be working for equality, you really have to get comfortable with being called out on things.
Especially if you're white.
Yeah.
That's like 75% of the job.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's something that I see a lot of my straight white male friends struggle with a lot.
You have straight white male friends? Why? Why would you do that to yourself?
We live with them.
Yeah, we do.
Don't let them into your home.
No, we're infiltrating and we're changing them very, 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 very slowly.
Yeah.
Better than not at all.
I would say maybe yours is changing a little more slowly than
You were saying.
Yeah. I think that's something that I've observed that my straight white male friends struggle with the hardest, and it's no surprise that they have the most privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they're going to struggle with the most because they have the most things that they can be called out on.
Yeah.
Right? But
and the biggest cushion that they've been sitting on for so long.
Yeah, it's fun watching them. Fun. Maybe fun's not the right word.
Oh no, I think it is.
It is kind of fun to watch them evolve in the way that they think. I have one male friend that particularly has been interesting to watch because I am not afraid to call people out, and I'm also not afraid to maybe hurt their feelings a little bit in the process because it's something that they need to feel to make a change. And maybe I'm not as sensitive as I could be, which is something I've learned as I go. But having gone in the past year and a half from him not really listening to me to coming to me with being like, what do you think about this? This is what I think. Do you agree with me? Like, it's taking a long time, but it's like, to be able to see that change, and I don't think I'm the only person that's affected that change in his life, but to be able to see that is like, really makes me proud.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was a lot of work.
Yeah. That's how I feel about every non-disabled friend I have.
Yeah.
You know? I'm like, oh, look at you. You know, like they'll be like, there are no curb cuts at this intersection. What the fuck? I'm like, yeah. Welcome to the world. Like, glad to have you. This place is a nightmare. Like, yeah. No, for sure. I mean, there's definitely those markers of progress that I think it's fine to feel proud. You know, I mean, they do the work, so you can't take full credit.
Oh, yeah.
But you've certainly helped them get there, you know?
Yeah. It's not easy, and you have to be really patient. And I'm not always the most patient person, so it's something that I struggle with. But I think it can be really rewarding when you're willing to take the time.
Yeah, because not everybody is an educator type, you know, especially like burdening people of color with like, educate me about race. It's like, that's like the classic example of white feminism, right?
Yeah.
Being like, but I didn't know. It's like, read, use Google. Like it's there. It's Google. Literally there. Like this is not some like magic thing that is being kept from you until you ask the right person of color to like open the way, you know, like this is available to you. But I mean, like I have found that as a white person and like the type of disabled person that most able people do not find intimidating in the way that they find a lot of disabled people, which says a lot, you know, there's a lot to unpack there. But like I am in a good position to do educational work and I like it, you know, and I think that's the thing is like if you like doing it as part of your feminism, the like educational aspect of things, absolutely, but you can't force that role on another person.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's well, that kind of reminds me of, do you remember Queen Latifah has been criticized for not being like out like really out and proud, and I find things like that so frustrating because you're just like, it's not up to you to decide who's going to be a representative. And
also let people be queer how they want to be queer.
Yeah.
Like as long as everybody is like a consenting adult, it's none of your business. You know, and especially like, I mean, I think with the race dynamics there, it is also weird because it's all the like white cis queers yelling at a black woman for like not being out enough. You know what I mean? And it's just like, stop it, you know, like this isn't for you. I think white people in general have a very hard time with when things are not about us, like making it about us. And it's like, no, actually, like not everything is yours.
Yep.
So
I do. Well, that's an interesting point is ownership of things. And something that I want to talk about is who owns femininity, because we as a society think of femininity as being a woman thing. And part of my journey in understanding drag has been questioning the idea that femininity belongs to women, because who says? Mm-hmm. Who says that? And I think when I first started thinking about drag, which was not that long ago, because it wasn't something that I encountered that much in my life, I struggled with feeling like something was being taken away from women, something that should belong to women, and we only have some things that get to be ours, and now men are taking it and making it theirs. And I think I had a little bit of anger about it, but it took me some time and talking with a lot of people about different things, different perspectives, and eventually I arrived at the idea that, well, it's not very feminist to think that femininity belongs to women only, exclusively. That's not feminist. Mm-hmm. And that was something I needed to break down and get rid of the way I thought about things. And beyond that is that I started to realize that drag is not, I think I thought it was kind of like a caricature representation of what is feminine, because it's to the extreme in a lot of ways. And I thought that that was a negative thing, but eventually I realized it's actually a celebration in a way, and it's taking something that was used against gay men primarily, mm-hmm. I would say. Something that's used against them, there's part of them that is effeminate, and embracing it and celebrating and saying, you know, this is who I am and I am not ashamed of it. And once I started to look at that way, I really changed my mind about it.
I grew up in a very like open household, and my mom would always tell me about her best friend before she had me, and they would like go to drag clubs. From that point forward, I was just very interested, and so I tried to learn more about it, and then that's when I discovered Divine. And I think that if that's like your first introduction, you understand that it's not necessarily about being 100% feminine. It's about art. And it's about not all drag is about performance and a performance piece, but that's definitely kind of what Divine was for me. For me, it wasn't about like being a woman. It was about being an artist, because mm-hmm. like sitting down and doing makeup, that was always art for me. And then kind of getting into John Waters and Divine, like that was more art for me. I think because I was so exposed to it when I was young, it was a lot easier for me to like just kind of jump in and understand more where it was coming from, because that was my exposure to it.
Yeah,
for sure.
We've never talked about that.
I know.
That's like one of the few things we've never talked about.
I know.
And I don't think we've ever like gone to any. No, we have.
No, we have.
We have. We've gone to drag shows,
but we just never talked about it.
No.
I mean, I know it's something that you're really into, and you watch Drag Race and everything.
Yeah.
But it's something that I kind of just like put into a box for a while, and I was like, that's not something I need to think about. Mm-hmm. Until like kind of recently, and then I started thinking about it, and then I
have a very kind of I guess I should say like critical and cautious relationship to engaging with drag, because, you know, a lot from the drag vernacular has become part of mainstream culture now, mm-hmm. right? Like throwing shade is like a mainstream term now. Yeah. Like politicians are using mm-hmm. it on each other, you know what I mean? And like as a white person, I'm very like, I'm gonna stand over here, I'm gonna not say that this belongs to me, because these traditions by and large are founded by people of color, mm-hmm. right? And so I'm like, you know, I tend to avoid using those vernacular terms in my own speech, because I'm like, that's a word that I came up with, and it feels weirdly appropriative for me to be using that. Yeah. And I don't know, I mean, I've been to a few drag shows, you know, and they've been, you know, they've featured queens of like all races and gender identities, perhaps. You know, that's also a thing too, because like trans politics are becoming more mainstream now, you know, being talked about, if not understood. I mean, look at fucking North Carolina, and they're disaster situation. It's like, just because people know that trans people exist, it's not necessarily a good thing to be visible, unequivocally good. It's like, well, now you're having all these laws passed and, you're like, right to public space is like up for debate. You know what I mean? But it's very interesting to me that kind of drag vernacular and trans politics are both entering kind of a more mainstream conversation at the same time, because those aren't the same thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, you look back and you're like, well, are certain drag queens of yore actually trans women? And like, if this had been an identity that was like understood to be available, would they have identified differently?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, it's a very, and I don't know, like, I can't say that, especially with people of color. It's like such a complicating thing that I do not know anything about. I don't claim to know anything about it. So my view is like, it's great to me, for example, that Drag Race is like a thing that people watch, but it also, I'm like, is this going to be the equivalent of like straight girls coming to gay bars for their bachelorette parties? Because get the fuck out. Like, this isn't for you. You literally have everything else. Everything else belongs to you. Just like, stop it. Like, so I'm not like wary in a way that drag makes me uncomfortable in any way, but I am wary as like a white cis person who has never been part of that culture and only observed it from engaging with it in any sort of non-critical way. It was like you were saying before, like, you have to critique the things you like because otherwise you're asleep, right? And so I haven't quite figured out how to be like a drag fan without having that critical eye and being like, am I overstepping? Like, am I making this a thing that belongs to me when it really doesn't? And, like, I've certainly enjoyed the shows that I've been to for like the performative aspects, like you said, and also like, drag queens aren't the only form of drag. There are drag kings as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that's a whole other thing. It's like such an interesting, I've never actually been to a drag king show, but I would really like to go just to see. Yeah. What was it like?
The atmosphere was definitely different between drag queen shows that I've gone to, not art performance drag queen shows. Just because I feel like with the drag kings that I saw, it was more of the performance, and it just wasn't the like what you would expect to see from a drag queen show, like where you go and there's like the typical songs that are playing, and then there's that performance. It was just very different.
Yeah, I mean,
like the art's different.
Yeah, and
I've been to, and I don't like this term for drag queens, but I've been to bio queens performance.
What does that mean?
A bio queen is a woman who does drag as a drag queen.
Okay.
Like a cis woman.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've been to those performances, and they're like, from just the ones that I've seen, they were more similar to like the drag queen style. So I don't think that was necessarily even about gender. I just felt like the drag kings, their performances were a little different and a little.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the things that I've enjoyed the most about the drag queen shows that I have been to, because I do have this very kind of take a step back relationship with the whole thing. I'm very reluctant to like dive into drag fandom because I don't want to feel like I'm appropriating something that doesn't belong to me. But like, the thing that has been very interesting for me is the whole like diva culture, and like why certain cis female musical figures are revered within the drag canon as like go-to choices. Like, I mean, one of the best performances of any variety that I've ever seen was this like ancient queen. She was in probably her like 80s or 90s singing It's All Coming Back to Me Now, and it was just like the best. I was like, this is amazing. And I think that that's very interesting because that ties up with a lot of other things that I'm very interested in about like what makes a celebrity, like who, where does fame come from, and like the gay male fan base is such like a cornerstone for a lot of these iconic pop divas. They like owe so much of their career to gay men, and like the way that it kind of coalesces with drag culture. Like that sort of thing is very interesting to me as it relates back to all of these other forces about fame and celebrity and like what beauty is, you know, stuff like that. But I'm not like the type of person who like dives headfirst into drag fandom. Yeah. Just because I'm a little bit more reluctant to do that, you know?
Well, kind of back to what you were saying earlier, there's like this catch-22 with things that are counterculture becoming mainstream because they become more accepted and less outside.
There was that entire New York Times article a few months ago about how hipsters basically just look like lesbians and how it's like very confusing for lesbians.
That's amazing.
That's real. That's true. I can't say it is very confusing. So yeah.
But there's that catch-22 of like it becoming more accepted, I guess, and it becoming appropriated. Right. So
I mean, there's no perfect answer, you know? I think you just have to be like, it's sort of like the stuff we've been saying this whole time, right? Like, you like something, it's okay that you like something, but I think that you need to be aware of the reasons why. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like, what is it about this thing that you like? Is that okay? you know, like just kind of doing the thing, like feminist Lasik, right? Like the thing you have to do. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with liking stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, you just have to like examine why it is that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I think you summed that up pretty perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish we had more time because femininity. I'll never. It's just, you know what? It is what it is. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. But it's a topic that we could just keep going on. Like I know that there are a lot of things that we didn't discuss. We didn't discuss what it is, what femininity is for young boys, and we didn't discuss what femininity is for people of color, and there are just a lot of things that we weren't able to get to.
Or that we maybe don't have the perspective to lead that conversation.
We are not qualified.
We're not qualified.
Yeah, exactly.
But we'll maybe in the future we will find some people who want to come on that are qualified and will help us with that. Yeah.
I have to say, it's kind of fun having a guest.
It is.
I wasn't sure how it was going to go because I didn't know. It's new. It's a new thing, and we're trying it out. And I think I'm pretty. How do you feel about it?
I had fun.
Good.
It was good.
Good.
Yeah.
I think we all enjoyed it.
We all had a little fun. All right. So follow us on social medias and
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Twitter. What was the thing that you said last time that I couldn't say?
I don't remember.
I think it had R's in it. I don't remember.
Rate, review, subscribe.
There we go. Rate, review, subscribe. Mm-hmm. Yep. Do that. We're on Instagram and Twitter.
And check out our website. Soon there will be merch.
Maybe by the time you listen to this, there will be merch.
Check it out.
I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. We love you.
Love you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
SheSplain.